favorite periods of history. One part you'll spend a lot of time talking about next year in a push, and that's our early republic. At this point, we're not even a republic. And this is when the Second Continental Congress meets. And it meets not too far away in Philadelphia. The fairies are here. On May 10th of 1775. Does that mean we're halfway done? How is that even possible? I don't even understand how time works anymore. All right, so the Second Continental Congress meets. Now, historically speaking, what happened in April? April was Lexington and Concord, right, in Massachusetts. The shot heard around the world. So the war started sort of starting without officially starting, okay? So Lexington and Concord happens in April. In May, people from 12 of the colonies, Rogue Island doesn't feel like being a part of this, they meet, and by July, what do they produce? You know what they produce. The Declaration of Independence, right? We know this. So the Second Continental Congress did a few things, right? They were our de facto government. Yes. Am I not sharing my screen? Okay, well, that doesn't help you guys then. All right. So the Second Continental Congress, thank you. You'll see this, I guess, on FAQ. What is she talking about? All right, there we go. You see it now? All right. So the Second Continental Congress did a few things. They were like our de facto government, because if we're going to fight a revolution, you need some people making decisions and raising an army and trying to figure out how to fund this army, which they weren't able to do very well, and all these other sorts of things. Okay. They also were responsible for making the Declaration of Independence, which was primarily written by Thomas Jefferson. There we go. The Declaration is one of your required documents. So if you watch the video, the AP video homework thing already, you notice they said it's always best to explain when you have time to explain, right? So you also, obviously the first thing you have to do is, when you're doing an FRQ, is to respond to the prompt. But if you have time to explain, you're going to use one of those terms, explain what the term is, right? If you're talking about the Declaration of Independence, mention that it was written at the Second Continental Congress. You're not going to lose points for not mentioning the Second Continental Congress, but does it always help? It sure as heck can't hurt. All right, so when you have time, this is the kind of information you'd want to include. So today it is the the Declaration of Independence, FBI, and Bureaucracy. Go ahead.
So, on the AP exam, with the way it's structured on the computer, are we gonna be able to, when we're on one FRQ question, can we go back and forth between all different parts of it?
That is a good question.
Or is it one part at a time? Because sometimes on the AP daily videos, they do FRQ practice, and I would go pretty into detail in one area to answer the question, but then I was actually something.
If you have time to go back, go to another.
And then I had nothing to and then I had nothing.
I think it's one at a time, but I will double check. Unless if you guys have heard otherwise. I will check. I'll send an email actually right after this. So yes, is that for Q1 at a time, or do you have the open?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can see A, B, and C all at once.
Oh, you can see A, B, and C all at once. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, you'll see A, B, and C all at once. Yes. I just don't know if you'll see all the FRQs. I think that's probably one at a time. Also, you can put Articles of Confederation as a term today, because that was also a result. So keep in mind that this is how our government started. Our government was let's create this constitution, or this, how are we going to create our government? What are our values? And then we'll fight a war. No, it was, we fight a war. And there was oh, darn it. Okay, we want to break free, but if we want our own government, what are our values? How is it going to work? So it was aiming after you already fired your gun, right? So the war starts basically, then they're oh crap, we got to put these people together. Okay, here's the Declaration of Independence that says we're leaving, and these are our values, and we have to create a government. Therefore comes the Articles of Confederation, which is one of the reasons why it was so weak. There wasn't really all this time and thought really put into it. It was put together because we needed a government to be put together. And so remember, for the exam, to know the weaknesses of it, I believe, was it Dua went over them? One of you guys went over the weaknesses last class. Who did it? Oh, maybe in my B-Day class. I think Aiden went over it in my B-Days. So, what's that?
The two main weaknesses are no standing military and the inability to.
There's more weaknesses, but those are the two most important ones. If you know those two, I think you're good, right? And then what you want to know is, how did the Constitution rectify those two mistakes, right? You want to know that you want to know basically there was really no federal government under the Articles of Confederation, right?
I'm just curious if I'm remembering something correctly. So there were 13 representatives, and something could only be passed if 9 of them wanted it, right? Like it wasn't just a regular majority; it had to be 9. So that's part of why nothing ever got done.
Under the Constitution, right?
Right.
Well, remember, and also you have 12 because Rhode Island didn't participate in almost anything.
But
Yeah.
But it had to be some like.
But remember, under the Constitution, you also needed 9, so that really wasn't a change, right? Like under the Constitution, you still need 9. You needed 9 states to ratify the Constitution for it to become a thing. You
Well,
need
no, not for it to be ratified, but like under the Articles of Confederation, like when drafting policy and passing laws, it had to be like a really high majority
and nothing, and you
of
right.
representatives, so nothing ever got through. But what was that number?
What was the number?
I thought it was like 9 out of 13.
I believe so, but I know like they didn't even meet really enough for that to be a thing. So I will double check, but I know like there really wasn't a functioning federal government. There was a loose-based Congress based on this, but it was unicameral. It wasn't bicameral, right? And it just did not.
And there was no executive.
No executive, no judicial, right? None of that. All right, so if I was in Philadelphia today, I'd be celebrating. No. That's that. That's just a little quick. Like I said, it's good to always, if you can add the context. You're not going to write a history paper. You're not writing a history FRQ, but a little explanation here or there does not hurt. The other thing that happened today in history, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we're going to do actually another review video on some of this, but this is when J. Edgar Hoover became the first director of the FBI, a very famous, well-known, somewhat controversial, lots of books on him, on the FBI. I can tell you what, you ask the average adult, they think J. Edgar Hoover was president. Seriously, ask some people. They'll be like, oh, what do you know about J. Edgar Hoover? I forget we did have a President Hoover, but this was not him. But this is a well-known name, so sort of like people just always assume Hamilton was president or Franklin. Like, no, guys, they were not president, right? Same thing. So think about this as far as what powers, where do powers go, who gets what powers. This is actually literally a screenshot from a Quizlet that you guys love, right? It's a governmental agency within the U.S. Department of Justice. So it's under the Department of Justice, and it has 2 roles as both federal criminal investigative organization and an internal intelligence agency. So what does this mean? It means it's part of our bureaucracy. That's a big word. What's a bureaucracy? Remember, we went over it as sort of like a 4th branch of government, but not really, right? It has a lot of independence, but also it comes under the umbrella of a lot of things. And that's what makes bureaucracy sort of tricky. This is literally just another screenshot. Okay, there's no article, right? You have the Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3. Legislative, executive, judicial. There's no Article 4. Well, there is an Article 4, but it's not about bureaucracy, right? So it mentions some hints to it. Madison creating a bill to create a Department of State. Like, we need people to help out. We can't do this by ourselves. But there's no official requirement for a bureaucracy in our Constitution. It's something that has evolved as we've grown bigger. Okay, so you don't need to know all of this stuff on here, right? But it's just to show that how bureaucracy has grown over time, how the FBI is part of that bureaucracy, right? There was a FRQ. I saw a sample that asked a question about the FBI. I was going to put this on here, but then I was like, "Ooh, I didn't. I didn't feel happy with the FRQ." But I think I might share that with you on Thursday, so that you can at least see like what if you had to like outline this in 5 minutes, how would you outline it? Is basically what we're going to do.
Wait, so how did we determine who elects the heads of bureaucracy and stuff like that?
Well, it's often. I think that's in the one video I went over a while ago I made. So it's often. Sometimes it is. I guess it depends. Is the short answer, right? But there still needs to be approval. So if the executive branch puts someone in, usually it needs to be approved, almost like a cabinet position. So there's some oversight.
Because there are legislative and executive bureaucracies.
Yes.
But how did we determine who elects those heads because it wasn't in the Constitution?
How did we make a plan for it?
Yeah,
Like how do we say who this is how we're going to do it?
Elects these heads and Congress elects these heads and didn't they figure that over time?
The legislative, eventually the legislative branch sort of made a plan for it. Yes. Yeah. It did happen. Like they did make laws on how are we going to create these things. But it gets tricky because some people don't like if the president puts in a certain head of a certain bureaucratic job, they're not supposed to be working for the president, right? That's something we saw a lot in the last administration. There's supposed to be some independence there. But you see lots of pressures on them. So I will pull up, there's the one video I did on the bureaucracy a while ago. Maybe I will put this in the comments when I attach it on YouTube. If you want to rewatch that one, that might be helpful. Because that was a while ago at this point. All right, so like I said, I wanted to keep this sort of short today. It's not really many political terms, but it's just good to keep these things in our mind. So I'm going to stop.
So are the processes different for appointing a head of